Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Paraspar event organized by the Office of Communication, Indian Institute of Science. Today's event is a little different from what we usually have. Instead of a talk, we have a book discussion today on the book The Moving of Mountains. It's a book about the journey and the philosophy of Agastya International Foundation. We have a very interesting lineup in the schedule. But before we begin, we'll screen a small film about the philosophy and the journey of Agastya International Foundation. So,
Sound.
Child should feel, hey, this is a very unusual, exciting environment. It's a fun environment that there's a lot to discover and learn.
సో అగస్త్య ఏంటంటే ప్రతి ఒక్కటి హ్యాండ్స్ ఆన్ ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్, దెర్ ఇస్ నో లిమిట్స్ ఫర్ లెర్నింగ్. సో ప్రతి ఒక్కటి కూడా మోడల్స్ ఉంటాయి. మోడల్స్ అంటే మనం ఏదైతే టెక్స్ట్ బుక్ లో ఉంటుందో అది ప్రత్యక్షంగా లైవ్ లో మనం చూడొచ్చు, మనం హ్యాండ్స్ ఆన్ ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ చేయొచ్చు, మనమే కూడా చేయొచ్చు. ఇంకొకటి ఏంటంటే ప్రతి ఒక్కటి అవైలబిలిటీలో ఉంటుంది. ప్లస్ మనకు ఒక ఇన్స్ట్రక్టర్ ఉంటారు, ఆయన ఇన్స్ట్రక్ట్ చేస్తారు, చేసి చూపిస్తారు. ఎన్విరాన్మెంట్ ఫ్రెండ్లీగా ఉంటుంది. నెంబర్ 1 ఫ్రీడమ్ ఉంటుంది, కావాల్సినవన్నీ అవైలబుల్ గా ఉంటుంది. ఒక మనిషి నేర్చుకోవడానికి ఏమేమి అవైలబుల్ గా కావాలో ప్రతి ఒక్కటి ఉంటుంది. సో దానివల్ల నేర్చుకునేస్తారు.
Initially it's curiosity, then they learn to use their hands, their senses through more frequent interactions. So they learn to actually create an activity or make something. Then they learn teamwork and collaboration, right? That builds their confidence, their sense of the interpersonal relationship. It's a caring environment. So how the child is met by the Agastya teacher is very important.
మనం ఖచ్చితంగా భయపడతాము టీచర్స్ కి అండ్ ఆ డిస్టెన్స్ అనేది ఉంది. బట్ అగస్త్యాలో అలా కాదు, చాలా ఫ్రెండ్లీ ఎన్వైరన్మెంట్ ఉంటుంది. మనం కరెక్ట్ చెప్పినా రాంగ్ చెప్పినా వాట్ ఎవర్ మన యొక్క ఆలోచనల్ని ఐడియాస్ ని చాలా హ్యాపీగా రిసీవ్ చేసుకొని మనల్ని కరెక్ట్ చేసి ముందుకు తీసుకెళ్తారు.
And then of course the kinds of things we do, the activities, make you wonder, hey, how did that happen? That arouse your curiosity. That's the feeling that they should go through. That at the end of the day, I experienced something new. That's the aha that we talk about in Agastya's mission.
ಸೊ ಸ್ಕೂಲಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಇದು ಓದಬೇಕು, ಇದು ಬರೀಬೇಕು, ಇದು ಭಯಪಡಬೇಕು, ಇದು ಹೋಗಿ ಸರ್ಗೆ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೀವಿ. ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ದ ಇನ್ ದ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಔಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ ಏನಾದ್ರು ನಾವು ಏನು ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟಿವ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ನಾವು ಏನು ಹೊಸ ವಿಚಾರ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ದ ಔಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಥಿಂಕಿಂಗ್ ದ ಅಗಸ್ತ್ಯ. ಸೊ ಹೀಗಾಗಿ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟಿವ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ.
The Agastya mission is really not something external or extrinsic. It is something that's a way of life, that's very natural. That every human being, if they experience an aha moment, makes life that much more fulfilling. You just have to have the energy and the interest to do that. If you can spark that energy and interest, then it becomes completely sustainable and effortless.
నేను ఎప్పుడైతే అగస్త్య విజిట్ చేశానో అదే ఆ మూమెంట్. ఎందుకంటే అది ఒక కొత్త ప్రపంచం. నా లైఫ్ లో ఎప్పుడు నేను ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ చేయలేదు, వాళ్ళు వీళ్ళు చెప్తేనే విన్నా. తర్వాత దాంట్లో గృహ అనేసి ఒకటి ఉంది. దాంట్లో స్పేస్ గురించి మొత్తం వేస్తారు. ఐ మీన్ స్పేస్ గురించి కొద్దిగా వీడియోస్ వేసి, ప్లస్ మనిషి ఎలా పుట్టాడు, సో ఒక పెద్ద కొలాప్స్ అయ్యి బిగ్ బ్యాంగ్ థియరీ, ఇలా ప్రతి ఒక్కటి కూడా క్లియర్ చూపించారు. సో అవన్నీ చూసిన తర్వాత నేను లిటరల్ గా అది గూస్ బంప్స్ మూమెంట్. అంటే నా లైఫ్ లో ఎప్పుడు చూడలేదు కాబట్టి ఫస్ట్ మాకు ఎటువంటి మూమెంట్ వచ్చింది, ఐ మీన్ ఆశ్చర్యకరమైన మూమెంట్ వచ్చింది. తర్వాత ప్రాబ్లమ్ సాల్వింగ్ స్కిల్స్, క్రియేటివిటీ పెరిగింది. ఇంకొకటి ఏంటంటే మాకు ఫియర్ అనేది లేదు. సో మేము ది బెస్ట్ గా తయారవడానికి డెవలప్ అయినాం. ఆల్ మూమెంట్స్.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Agastya Murthy, and on behalf of Agastya International Foundation, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this edition of Paraspar. and to a very special conversation that brings together science, storytelling, and the spirit of creative learning. We are honored to introduce a truly distinguished guest whose foreword graces the opening pages of our book, The Moving of Mountains by Adhirath Sethi. He is Dr. A.S. Kiran Kumar, one of India's most respected scientists and former chairman of the Indian Space Research Organization. Dr. Kiran Kumar has played a pivotal role in shaping India's space program. As Secretary, Department of Space, and ISRO Chairman from 2015 to 2018, he oversaw landmark missions including Chandrayaan-1 and the Mars Orbiter mission, and he has been instrumental in the development of India's indigenous space technology. A proud alumnus of IISc Bangalore, Dr. Kiran Kumar has received the Padma Shri and the Knight of the Legion of Honor, the highest French Order of Merit for military and civil achievements that is bestowed by the government of France, and numerous awards for lifetime achievement in science and innovation. Dr. Kiran Kumar's deep admiration for our organization Agastya's grassroots innovation and creativity-led education shines through in the book's foreword, where he compares Agastya's journey to India's own space endeavors, bold, improbable, and ultimately transformative. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. A.S. Kiran Kumar, a visionary who embodies the spirit of exploration, both scientific and social, that Adhirath Sethi's book so powerfully celebrates. May I invite on stage also Adhirath Sethi, and Professor G.K. Ananthasuresh, one of your own. Dr. Kiran Kumar will address the gathering, after which we will begin the conversation.
Good evening to all of you. So indeed it's a great pleasure to be present here, where I did my master's program in the physics department and subsequently joined ISRO. And then through the journey of space activities, one of the things we learn is you need to create systems which can go beyond planet Earth and do a lot of activities. That is, we build systems which explore the universe. Now, while you are building systems which explore the universe, you also realize that this explorer, we have to build into that some features which can take inputs and some features which will enable it to perform its functions. It needs a controller for doing all this, and one memory where we can put the information for all external activities, and another memory where we put lot of instructions for self-sustenance and then self-preservation and protection. If you look at that human being, if we map these 5 entities to human beings, we get a one-to-one mapping. We are all endowed with 5 sensory organs, Gnanendriyas. We are endowed with actuators, Karmendriyas. We have an asli intelligence which we are trying to mimic outside as artificial intelligence. There is an intelligence within us which takes the sensory inputs and builds its ability to conduct itself by filling up one memory space throughout our life. And we also enter this world with one memory which carries in some way a sum total of lot of things that has happened before our birth into this. That means that is one memory which we can also say is the one which is enabling self-preservation, self-protection as a sort of fallback, or you can say factory settings, where the controller, when it has not learned how to deal with itself in this life, may resort to dipping into this fallback option and conduct ourselves. But anyway, the point what I'm only trying to tell is every human being is a highly evolved robotic system. When you enter the world, the sensory inputs are actually interpreted by the controller through a process, and this process is present in every individual. And what is being talked about, the curiosity of the child and also the child's ability to learn things through what it sees around is what develops it. So normally what happens in any development is, we are all very familiar with the examples where we appreciate the child saying, oh, look at this good boy, look at this girl, what brilliant questions he asks, etc. Very soon we realize that we are not in a position to answer their questions. So we don't want to accept that we do not know. So we will make that child, we suppress its curiosity, says you are a chatterbox, you are this, that. In some way, we suppress it. So what happens in that child is its intrinsic curiosity of mimicking nature around it and learn is getting suppressed by the kind of environment it encounters around. So in a way, every child has this curiosity, and its ability to mimic nature depends on the kind of environment it receives. In normally today's education system, we are not allowing enough time and space for every individual to understand what features and capabilities they have in exploring this universe. Because right through our journey in the world, we are exploring, we are interacting, and for that we are developing ourselves. But we do not pay sufficient attention how this operates. If you look at, in this case, the human being all along, what he has been trying to do is enhance the capabilities that is provided. Obviously, the sensory organs, what is given to him, cannot be changed much. If you have an eye, it can only see between 400 to 700 nanometers. But today we have built enough technological tools which can make him look at what is happening in nature in other wavelengths by building an infrared camera or an X-ray or SAR, etc. Same way in terms of movement, we have built lot of gadgets which can take the human being across space while he himself is capable of doing only a few kilometers an hour. Now we have built gadgets which can take him maybe tens of kilometers per second. So it's an ability the human being is trying to do all along, enhance the capabilities that he has got and explore nature. And it is here what Agastya has done or is trying to do is a huge change in the approach. The traditional education system make it more or less confined. We want to tell what you should do, how you should do. We are not giving enough opportunity for the child to experience by virtue of exploring how its sensors work, how its actuators function, how the control system it has got, make sense of all this. And it is here, when I first went to Agastya, it was also in a way spellbinding, because even though the space is large, they have created enough opportunities for the children to be curious, learn things from their own experience, and what you learn from your own experience will last much more, and your ability to deal with the world also becomes that much more. So what is done in this particular book, probably you will have more time to listen to the interaction both with the author and the person who is going to interact with him. Agastya International over last quarter century has been making huge difference to the way those who do not have access to many of the resources that we are familiar with, big towns and big places, to them, showcasing to them that they have within them an ability which can surpass what is actually available in big cities and places. Because one of the key things we realize is, in many ways, in big places or in well-to-do environment, our drive is more on making the individual know what we know. We are not giving enough opportunity for them to learn. Whereas in this environment, by allowing them to explore nature and explore things, they have done a fantastic job. Just a couple of examples to talk about that, what I saw during the course of my own interaction with Agastya International. The curiosity is the basic entity. every individual is very curious. Like I said, this curiosity we keep suppressing as we grow up because we are not getting sufficient answers to the questions that we pose. And one of the things they have found in that is what probably those who have seen the book might see, Operation Vasanta, where the concept of training the trainer, student teachers became a reality, where a young girl became the young instruction leader who won prizes at the Initiative for Research and Innovation on STEM IRIS programs which are conducted. Agastya students over a period of time have been winning this national level competition. And then one other very interesting thing was when a person, a foreign person came for interaction, he asked a question, what do you know about Olympics? Only one person raised a hand. But at the end of the program, students asked him a question. They asked him, what kind of crops do you grow? So then he makes a statement that if you are a teacher, don't presume that your picture of the world is their picture. He asks, what is Olympics? Student asks, what crops do you grow? That means many times we think what we know about the world is what others should know, but then we do not allow others to explore in this. So what Agastya has been doing over a period of these 2.5 decades is really making a huge change in the way the learning happens and the way students are given opportunity to explore, go through hands-on experience, and also allow their intrinsic ability of making use of what is provided to practically every individual in terms of its sensing elements, controllers, and then asli intelligence, which we are trying to mimic outside. I just close my this thing with one simple observation. Today, what human being has done right from the early times, if you look at, is nothing but expanding his ability to make use of his own capabilities of actuation and taking it to higher and higher levels. And in this, all areas of development, if we ask a question, is there anything a human being has created in this world, the concept of which does not exist in nature? Probably you need to find an answer for yourself. But my own reading is there is nothing like that that has happened so far. That means today, the next generation, based on what they have seen in the past, they have opportunity to learn from nature and create new things and not only comprehend nature but also experience it. So I would like to really appreciate Agastya for what they have done. And over this period of 2.5 decades, probably they have touched many millions of students, many millions of teachers across the country. And I'm sure you will learn little more about that during the course of the interactions that is going to transpire. And thank you very much for this opportunity to interact with Agastya and share some of my thoughts with you. Thank you.
Here's a small token of appreciation.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to explore The Moving of Mountains, a book that chronicles the remarkable journey of the Agastya International Foundation over the last 25 years. It is one of India's most visionary educational initiatives. Over the past quarter century, Agastya has brought hands-on science, art, ecology, design thinking, and innovation to over 25 million children and 3 lakh teachers across India in government schools across rural and underserved communities. But The Moving of Mountains is more than just an institutional biography. It is a beautifully written story of how a powerful idea took root on barren land in Andhra Pradesh and it blossomed into a nationwide movement. What was that idea? That curiosity and creativity in education are not luxuries, but essential tools for change in the hands of our next generation. This is also a story that is deeply intertwined with IISc. From the very beginning, IISc scientists and faculty have supported Agastya's vision not just as advisors, but as thought partners, collaborators, and advocates. Some of the foundation's earliest breakthroughs were seeded in conversations held right here on this campus among members of this very community. That relationship continues to flourish today, and we are proud to host this dialogue in a place that has been such a crucial part of Agastya's journey. This evening, we are fortunate to be joined by the author of The Moving of Mountains, Adhirath Sethi, who brings to life the people, challenges, and serendipities behind Agastya's evolution. Adhirath is in conversation with Professor G.K. Ananthasuresh, a distinguished faculty member of IISc, and someone who, like Agastya, believes deeply in the transformative power of creativity-based education. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Adhirath Sethi and Professor G.K. Ananthasuresh for what promises to be a fascinating discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. for organizing this Paraspar event, and Dr. Kiran Kumar for coming over to make introductory remarks about the book. Whenever we read a book, we imagine a world of our own, and that world may be different from that of the author's imagination when the author wrote the book. So when I was reading this book, I imagined a world that I actually had seen. This is not a book of fiction, as you know. This is a book based on facts, based on, I would say, early history of Agastya International Foundation. I'm fortunate that I'm able to meet the author who wrote the book so that I can compare the world I imagined with what he had imagined. Both of us seen Agastya. I had met him once in a large group last year, and then recently I met him for the first time. And we talked about many things, but not about the book. So whatever I'm going to ask now, he's going to give spontaneous responses. In other words, I have 20 questions, but I have not leaked the paper to him. So they say that a book cannot be judged by its cover, but I want to differ with that today. That this book, if you see, well, people sitting in the far corner may not be able to see, but there is a bus that has square wheels, not round wheels, and of course, it says that Kiran Kumar wrote the foreword and the moving of mountains. And another thing I see is that there are a few little symbols here, usually a microscope, test tube, a atom model, what all signify research as science. But there are a few little white things here. I would like Adhirath Sethi to talk about what those little things are.
Am I audible? Oh, it's much louder for me. Okay. Well, firstly, thank you, Professor Suresh. As you said, when I spoke with you that day, I had no idea you were withholding questions. Otherwise, I would have spoken longer and probably figured out what there was I was going to be asked. But thankfully, it's about the book, so that's nice. The white things are what we like to call tippy tops. I suppose there's another name for it. Many of you who go from Bangalore to Mysore would have stopped at Channapatna, and probably these tops would have presented themselves at some point. I'm not sure when Ramji found the tippy top, but at some point he spun it, and to whomever I think he spun it in front of, it has this ability to just flips halfway through its journey. And oh gosh, no, I'm not sure if I should, but I've never been very good at this, but okay. There we go. And yeah, so go on.
I just want a slide to be shown. Somebody was here. The slide in the computer, or I can do it. Yeah, so you can spin it also.
Can I just say I'm very proud of that because it normally doesn't respond to me in this manner.
It really did when we did.
There we go. Yes, it has this unique ability to just flip entirely. And when I was actually writing the book and I tried to find the equation or whether there's any science behind it, I realized that it was actually quite complex. There is actually a very profound mathematical reason or equation that governs the physics.
There it flips.
So as you can see, that's I think Niels Bohr, and it's in the book. Yeah, exactly. And they're staring at it much like we are right now. And it's not a simple explanation, but what we realized is it actually makes the perfect symbol for Agastya's aha and ahaha mission, which is that you see it spinning and it flips, and that is the ah moment when you kind of aren't quite able to understand what is exactly happening. And then the aha comes a step later when you understand the physics behind it, which honestly speaking, I haven't understood yet, but when someone does, I suppose. And the ha-ha is, I suppose, applying that knowledge to anything. And this is what Agastya tries to do, I think, with all science, because there are things much simpler than, I think, a tippy top that a child encounters, and where the explanations are much more available to them, and where a teacher or an ignator from Agastya can actually help them. And so it became a talisman, I suppose, for Agastya's mission. And as I write in the book, if you force Ramji to empty his pockets, invariably there's one in them. And he'll be more than happy to explain or put it on the table and show you how it spins. And so we wanted it to, and throughout the book, I think we see illustrations of it. And, much respect to this little thing. It's a big part.
Thank you. Actually, the first chapter has it this way, and as you go through every chapter, it's tilting a little bit, and at the end of the book, you would have flipped it. Right? So it's as you say, the talisman of Agastya. It symbolizes where it's intriguing, whether its dynamics are quite complicated. We don't understand. As the story goes, apparently Niels Bohr and Wolfgang Pauli had discussed for a long time, and at some point, Bohr got up and went out of the door and said, "It doesn't matter, understand it or not, it still flips." So let's come into the book. The title itself is a very amazing title. Moving of the mountains, moving of mountains. This is a metaphor. So what does it stand for? What is it? Who is moving the mountains? Why are they moving it? How are they moving it? And where they have moved? And when has it moved? All questions, you can answer any question.
Well, like all things, it's still an evolving, the answer still evolves when people ask me, because I keep finding new things that actually make sense. But at the base of it was exactly, Agastya was named after the sage Agastya, who is both a legendary as well as a kind of a mythological figure. And I suppose the idea was, this was a person that spread education across India. And as his namesake, we were trying to emulate the same. But it goes deeper than that, wherein one of the most famous stories about him, of course, was that he was coming from the north to the south, and he was confronted with the Vindhyas. And he was unable to pass over, so requested the Vindhyas to bend forward so he could pass, and eventually came to the south and made the Vindhyas promise that it wouldn't rise again until he went north. And different reasons why he did this. Someone recently told me, that's why I said it's evolving, that Lord Shiva was sitting on the Himalayas and could see that the Vindhyas were kind of overtaking, and gave Agastya this mandate. I suppose his view was going to get obstructed, otherwise he was just feeling a little bit that he should be on the tallest mountain. And so he had given this mandate to Agastya, and either ways, Agastya knew he was not going back north in his lifetime. He ended his life, his days in the south. And so the Vindhyas stayed bent, and again, some people say that this was the reason the subcontinent stayed as one unit, that we were able to pass from the north to the south, otherwise we might have been two nations. So there's a spirit of unity that comes out of there. There's a spirit of the education that he brought. And the foundation was trying to do a lot of the same things. And in trying to do that, as Ramji said, and as the video attests, it was a Herculean task. It wasn't something that was going to happen overnight. And the other thing that was there in the book as well was that when we started, and we'll get to the mobile van, but when we started the mobile van concept, before that there was a school that was going to be set up. And so again, I think the idea was, if we can't bring the Muhammad to the mountain, then we have to take the mountain to Muhammad, which is to say we're going to take learning into the villages rather than bring children to the campus. So the metaphor kind of evolved as a result. And so when we were thinking of a good name, and to be honest, most authors just have a affinity for alliteration, so it fed into that. So moving of mountains became a really good, it sounded nice, and we really thought it fed well into Agastya's ethos.
Thank you. Yeah. Agastya talk, you said Herculean task. Let me say Agastya task. Where he was able to lower the mountains in India, and all Agastya has done. So let's just start at the beginning, very beginning, the genesis of Agastya. And you say in one of the chapters, very aptly titled, Three Wise Men. And there are two founders. We have one of them, and the other one is in the US. To have this one visionary movement called Agastya. So how did it start? How you describe it? It's very nice in the book, but I would like to hear from you now.
So as we describe it in the book, yes, it started with Ramji and Mahavir, both, I think, at a time when they were both thinking seriously about education. Mahavir told me that he used to discuss with Dr. Balasundaram extensively because his children were at that age where I think even he was finding the rote learning, the exam-based system a little bit strange, that, it wasn't quite what they had experienced, for example, in Rishi Valley, where education was important, but again, you were given a lot of liberty to go and explore and to climb hills and to ask questions and things like that. So I guess their quandary resulted in them trying to find an answer. And so Ramji left his job in the UK, he came here, and the two of them, Dr. Balasundaram was there, and K.V. Raghavan, Ramji's father, my grandfather. So the four of them were the initial group. And I think through K.V. Raghavan, P.K. Iyengar was brought into the fold. Again, Ramji's great uncle, I suppose, on his mother's side. And Dr. Iyengar was very, very well known and an eminent scientist in his own right, a former head of the Atomic Energy Commission. Between the five of them, what was interesting is only one person actually had a background in education. So Dr. Balasundaram was a former principal at Rishi Valley. The others were more or less coming from a completely outside-in perspective. And I guess the initial discussions, the workshops they had, discussions with IISc professors as well, I think we had a lot of that going on, resulted in this idea that we know what's wrong with the system. There's a rote-based, as Dr. Iyengar said, answerism has kind of become the principal method by which kids are educated, that you need to know the answer and that's it. And they felt that that was somehow impacting especially the disadvantaged sections of society, wherein you write an exam purely based on information you have pulled out of textbooks. And many of us know this as well, that when we did board exams, you memorize certain passages, which I'm sure a lot of us still remember today, because it's so deeply ingrained that you just pour it out in the exam paper and you know you're not going to get the mark if you don't. So I guess the five of them were trying to see an alternate to that kind of education. And coming from as I said, non-education background, most of them were, they were able to think of this extremely novel and out-of-the-box way of approaching the problem. And as we'll discuss, I think that resulted in Agastya's philosophy, and that's how the journey commenced.
Right. Actually, you said about answerism. We'll talk more about it. It's a nice phrase, answerism. Our education system, we always learn answers to the questions, irrespective of whether we understand it or not. And I remember in one of the first meetings, that ITPL brainstorming session, where that P.K. Iyengar looked at Ramji Raghavan, who is one of the founders, who was a banker, to say that tippy-top-like experiments, half a dozen of them, if we show it to you, you're going to want to do PhD, or something like that. That is, it's going to pique your interest and you want to do this. So I think that's there, but actually going back to, you said the way Agastya started, Ramji Raghavan, you wrote in the book that he had this dream, what he called Shangri-La, that there is a paradise-like school with peacocks dancing, rivulets flowing, very serene atmosphere. He wanted to build an international school. Okay. Is it?
Yeah, no, that's fine, sir. Yeah.
So, thank you. Yeah. He imagined this international school that he wanted to build, but that transformed now to what you call school of schools, a school for schools. And you also point out a conversation that Ramji had with one of his friends, Gopi Warrior, which is very telling, where his friend had heard about Ramji talking about this for a long time when he was still a banker, very successful banker. And they recall an incident in Rishi Valley where Jittu Krishnamurthy one day was walking outside Rishi Valley in the evening, and he saw a woman carrying firewood, and he, Jittu Krishnamurthy, helped that woman carry the firewood to her home. And people looked at it, why did he do it? Then Gopi Warrior apparently pointedly asked Ramji, uh, because he felt the pain of the woman who was carrying firewood on her head. So he asked Ramji, do you feel the pain? We want an international school. They should know what students feel, what they lack. So can you shed light on that angle of Ramji that made him change from this international school to what Agastya is today?
So many of us who know Ramji, and he's not here today, but yeah, when he speaks about Shangri-La, speaks about anything, there's a lot of color behind it, there's a lot of passion behind it. And I think even growing up, as we describe in the book, he had various moments where, and my father is here today, he will testify to this, where Ramji would have these bursts of, I think I'm going to go and I'm going to go to Bihar and just start teaching people, just off the cuff. And there was an element of truth to this, as we obviously later found out. But at that time, it was just testing this idea that maybe this isn't for me, and maybe there's just something else waiting out there. So Shangri-La was one of them. I think somewhere we write that he wanted to go work in a sugarcane plantation in Cuba. I mean, wild ideas that as kids we would be completely blown away by. Okay, that's a brilliant idea. Let's all go to Cuba and work in a sugarcane plantation. But I think when he started Agastya, it was, yes, Shangri-La was very much a part of it. He had this idea, I think, and by then, of course, he'd taken the plunge. He'd quit his job, so he knew he wanted to do something in education. He wasn't quite sure what. And I guess with with the team, with Mahavir, with the three wise men, they slowly chewed on this idea and said, okay, fine, we're going to start a school, a residential school, and it's going to be world class. And we're going to use these concepts of curiosity, creativity, innovation to make a system, or create an environment where kids pass through feeling the joy of learning rather than, as we said, just the answerism. And there were a lot of trials and tribulations. Obviously, this was 1999 when they started, 2000, 99, 2000, the dot-com bubble burst. A lot of the funding that was supposed to come in was drying up. And it didn't look like there was going to be enough to create an entire school. At least that amount of lump sum funding didn't look like it was going to come overnight. And I think they were on a fact-finding mission to one of the Chinmaya mission schools, I think. And it was then that this mobile van was discussed. So up until then, I think there was a lot of science fairs. There were a lot of teacher training interactions that they were doing. They were getting excellent feedback in terms of how this kind of learning can impact and otherwise can engage a child. But they hadn't yet put it to the actual test. And as it happened, they had these experiments lying around. They had a van that had been donated to them. And so Balram, who was the first employee of Agastya and whose own story is quite interesting to read about, was just told, okay, get in a van, take these experiments and go out. And few things happened. Obviously, a white van pulling up into a village, trying to get kids to come to it was a little bit of a suspect kind of a situation. So a lot of kids ran away. They thought it was vaccines, and in this day and age, obviously you wouldn't send a van to like that. So obviously the colors and the artwork that came on the vans was much later. The other was that people kept coming to the van saying, can you fix my mobile phone? Because they had this mobile van and everyone thought that's what Balram is there for. But once the kids saw the experiments, once they realized what he was there for, they were obviously more engaged. And the feedback from the villages, from the surrounding schools, was that this seems to be working. So can we have a little more of this? Can you send these? And at that point, they realized, okay, this is a time perhaps to pivot. We don't have the money to build an entire school. If we go to a donor asking for, I think the ask was about 25 million USD at that time. No one is going to be able to give us that, not in this market. But we can ask for smaller amounts, and we can use each of those small amounts to send one van out and grow in that sense in a more measured way, in a more organic way, and address those areas that we feel are genuinely lacking, where schools seem to be having issues with facilities, where the teachers are maybe not showing up every day. And so that became the mantra rather than let's have a school. And then that evolved eventually into what Agastya is today.
Yeah, I think you can you hear me at the back now? Is it okay now? Yeah. You talked about Agastya started with science fairs because that's how they start before even the mobile vans. There is one incident that was really remarkable in the book that you described. They were talking about a mega science fair. They were expecting maybe 500 people at that time was a large number, but suddenly they realized that near the Kupam village, there were 5,000 students wanted to come. So just 2 days before, 500 had to be scaled to 5,000. I guess it's about scaling. That incident, I think maybe you should describe how it happened, where students came forward to help out.
So, yeah, as you said, most of the fairs, I think, up until that point were 500, 600. They hadn't really seen the numbers. And there were a few instructors who had been trained, and so the manpower was quite fixed. And then this happened, as you said. The buzz had increased to the point where kids were hearing about it, surrounding villages were getting excited. Suddenly, this guy comes along saying, I know we said 500, but you need to prepare for 10x. And at this time, Agastya was like any startup, right? As a business person, you know that even if you're a small company, you get a huge order. You don't want to turn it away. You want to say, okay, I've got to figure out some way to make this happen. I can't turn around and say we can't do it. And so they were in that state, I think, where the answers weren't obvious, but they were brainstorming, trying to figure out what to do. And a group of girls comes forward and says that, look, do you want to just train us? We'll learn the stuff that you want to teach, and we can stand behind the stalls and effectively increase your scale you up overnight. So that was an interesting thing for them because they had not encountered, although peer-to-peer learning was somewhere in the sphere of what they were discussing, they hadn't seen it in action and they certainly hadn't prepared for it. So I think for the next few days they trained about 100 girls, and I think they brought their friends along and everyone was very excited. And now suddenly you had this entire cadre of young kids manning these stalls. And then the fair took on a whole other element altogether because you had kids coming in surprised that they were seeing children in front of them rather than grown-ups. The level of comfort was much more. They were listening and engaging. A lot of the times the kids who had learned stuff perhaps weren't 100% because obviously they just had 3 days. So the kids who were coming in were helping them, and there was an interactive element to their discussions. And the adult instructors were told, okay, you can go around, manage, and just supervise the entire thing. And that became the beginning of peer-to-peer learning. That was the seeds, you could say, to Agastya's. A lot of the kids here that we saw were YILs, young instructor leaders. And I think that was the starting point of that. So that fair kind of gave Agastya that initial boost to say that, okay, this seems to work, and let's structure it and build on it.
A crisis led to a solution.
Yeah.
And actually, in terms of learning, I read somewhere that in Shanti Parvam Mahabharata, there are 4 ways of learning that are mentioned. One is, of course, pedagogical learning. That is, some teacher teaches and you learn. The answer is a maybe. And the second thing is peer-to-peer learning. And that I think Agastya figured out. And then, of course, Agastya right from the beginning had this experiential learning. And the fourth is the social learning. All 4 learnings are embedded in Agastya. So this experiential learning, we saw a little bit in the movie that we saw. And the other is social learning. In the environment, you go and you see.
Yeah.
How can you explain how Agastya's view captured these 4 types of learning?
So we already had hands-on. I suppose the models were very obvious. And then, as you said, peer-to-peer came after that. And then I think what Agastya didn't realize even at that time, and you see this from the evolution of the 3 pillars. It started out with 3 pillars, which was curiosity, creativity, and innovation. And it wasn't until they saw the impact of some of these programs in terms of when you bring children into a leadership position, when you put them in charge of something and you make them accountable for what's going on there, it creates a whole other level of confidence. It creates a whole other level of ownership to the work that they're doing. And so the 3 pillars became 5, which is adding caring and confidence. And we write in the book about Hagi Rao. And when Ramji first met him, he was trying to describe what Agastya was doing. And again, I think he just called on him out of the blue, went to Stanford, heard about this guy. He went to his office and said, can we talk? And Hagi's response to what Ramji was doing, he said, what are you doing? He said, I think we're teaching these children science. And Hagi said, well, no, I think you don't realize, but you're teaching them love. You're teaching them a completely different aspect of what learning can do. So it became less about what is the child learning and more about what does the child come to believe about themselves through the learning journey. And that, I think, when Agastya reached that point, then I think a whole other, whole other facet of their operations opened up.
To probe this answer is a little further and why Agastya is doing this and why it's necessary, you talk about historically in India how did education system start? Not ancient times, but during British time. You mention this Lancaster Bell system of education, this monitorial Madras school that you described, and that also had in terms of you say one who teaches is the one who learns, but it sounds similar, but then Agastya is different. Can you distinguish the two? What bad things did Lancaster system do to Indian education versus what Agastya is now to do again with the peer-to-peer learning?
Well, as I was telling you earlier, of late there's been a lot of podcasts and discussions and interviews around this, and a lot of people come back to this because I think the question, unfortunately, many people want to ask is, what's the government doing wrong, for example, right? And to which I say, well, you're talking about a vast number of students that you need to educate. And as we write in the book, I think when it came to be, the Lancastrian system did have a peer-to-peer concept, which was somehow ignored. I'm not sure why. But I think it was also had to do something with, I guess at the British time, they were just trying to churn out as many babus and clerks, I suppose, that they could. And they weren't really interested in Indian students going on to do great things. So rising to the top from that system was obviously extremely difficult. And that system kind of just stayed on even after they left. And again, with the volumes, with the limited resources, it always becomes very difficult to say, okay, now how can you go back, for example, to a Gurukul system where you have a 1:5 or a 1:10 teacher ratio when you just don't have enough teachers? So Agastya was seeing that gap and trying to plug that gap in its way. And thankfully, the government recognized that it was a worthy addition to the school day and welcomed Agastya in almost every state we've been in. We've never had an issue of not being welcome and for the work that we're doing not being recognized. But I think it started with, yes, this is a system that has been built to churn out graduates rather than churn out creative thinkers or people that actually have a spirit of inquiry.
Yeah. Not definitely rote learning. Learning based on curiosity. Also the scaling, the way Agastya has moved on from science fairs to mobile vans, but also it became lab and a bike. And then there is science centers. So that scaling part of it, and you also mentioned Gopal Balram. And there was a nice incident that how somebody who drives a van suddenly becomes an instructor.
Yep.
I would like to hear that, the way you described in the book.
Yeah. So Tyagu, who's here, is the architect of that. So I think we can credit him for the eventual solution. But as we write in the beginning, though, when the vans started going out to schools, there was a cultural, I suppose, anomaly. I think you can call it. It's a very typically specific to India in that the instructor didn't want to be the driver of the van. And so there was a class divide, or you could say I'm a teacher. I sit at a much higher level. I'm not going to be the one who drives the van. And Agastya, being an organization that was trying to obviously be frugal, was saying that, well, now it's 2 headcounts rather than 1, but if one of you could, and they said it's not going to happen. In the rare case that an instructor said, I will do it, he'd say that the kind of principal would look around them and say, okay, where's the actual, you're the driver, so where's the guy who's supposed to be teaching them? So it became a bit of an issue. And I think the lab in a box came first. So I think they made the lab in a box. There were all these suitcases full of experiments. Instructors were told to take them by hand, use public transport, reach very, very small schools and engage children there. And I think it was Tyagu's idea one fine day to say, hey, take a bike, put a box on either side and send the guy out. And now 3 things happen. 1 is you have immense reach because the bikes go much deeper. 2 is you save on manpower. But 3 is the instructor rides in like a hero, right? He goes in with,
sunglasses.
Exactly, sunglasses. And if you have an Enfield or something, even better. But, the more rugged the bike, the more cool you look sort of riding into school. The principal treats you like a rock star, the children treat you like a rock star, and then everything is much smoother. So the LOB rather, has been, I think, more prolific since it came out. Also because the price point is lower, and you just get this wonderful deeper reach into rural India than even the vans can give. So I think it was really one of those design thinking innovations that Agastya is quite famous for.
That's very interesting. So everything, there is a crisis and you come up with a solution. Similar thing, it was really captivating to read in the book is what T.S. Suresh and Hamsalata, husband and wife, were given a task and they made it very successful. These science centers and bridge schools. So that's something that is very fascinating. And what they had to encounter, you have beautifully described in the book. Can you shed light on that aspect? And of course, there were third others. Some of them are here from Agastya.
I know it's very remarkable actually, because when you read about their story, you think, why would anyone do this, right? It's difficult. It's in the middle of nowhere. Many of the folks I spoke to said we had to figure out our own way of with each village. We had to kind of work out what it is that they want. What is the main person in the village? Why are they going to let me park my van there? For example, was a puzzle everyone was trying to figure out very organically. Each one had its own story. And he said we'd been given a pillow, a blanket, and a backpack, and told that look, there are nights where you'll have to spend the night in the van. So Suresh, interestingly enough, now Suresh is head of the campus. And when I met him and I asked him, "Have you read the book?" He had just joined. He said, "No, Adhirath, I have a 100-day policy, which I have not written about." And my son was with me, and we were just kind of both sitting after he left, going, "What's going on here exactly?" And I said, "What's the 100-day policy?" He said, "No, I've come here, and now for 100 days, I will do nothing else but figure out what I'm going to do here." So he said, "I've told my wife not to come from Bangalore. I've told my kids not to trouble me." And he said, "Unfortunately, I can't read your book until the 100 days are over." And it was almost sort of a yogic level of dedication to this new task that he'd undertaken, which I realized I'm seeing across the organization. So people saying that, no, I had to do it, so I had to figure out my own way. We describe about the L&T van, sort of someone driving from Bangalore to campus, getting it done, going back, driving overnight to Pune to kind of meet the deadline that the donor had set. And all of it just, it really makes someone from the outside sit up and think, well, why? And I guess the book tries to answer why, but it's still a great question, because as we say, there's a ethos of, I suppose, agency and learning, and not of a rival, right? To say that I've done something great is not what they're trying to do. It's an evolution, and it's always something new that they're trying to figure out, and none of them will ever accept that it's done, that we've arrived.
What you say that Suresh had said when he first came to Agastya is that teaching is in my DNA and blood within the family. And that's what I read about many people that I know from Agastya now. They say, somebody else says, Agastya is a big canvas, I want to paint on it. And I will work for my satisfaction. So that's the kind of volunteerism that Agastya has seen, which is remarkable. And these are the vision and mission that Agastya has set. If you actually look at Agastya today, we only had a glimpse in the movie. It's a remarkable Indian innovation, not a copycat. Such a thing does not exist, you see, in the book anywhere in the world. And this is a shining example, right? So this is actually is a world's largest creativity laboratory, not just in Kuppam, but maybe we should. The movie didn't capture the Kuppam campus enough. One has to visit. Since you have visited, so can you tell us about the Kuppam campus, what we see there when we go?
The Kuppam campus is a bit like the Matrix, I suppose. You have to actually go there, because as much as I've tried my best to describe it in words, in the book, and trust me, I really broke my head trying to say, am I doing justice to it? And Ramji had to eventually tell me, I think it's okay. Now you've reached a point where I think we've done as good a job as we can. But invariably, whatever I say here is going to fall short of actually going there and experiencing it. One is, of course, the ecological 180 that they've done there, which was a tract of barren wasteland, gravelly soil, white soil, which any self-respecting horticulturalist will know is devoid of any organic matter or anything that is conducive to life. And bringing that soil back was such a Herculean task. Agastyan task. Sorry, yes, I should rephrase that. And Yellappa Reddy, who, as you said, wanted to do it for his soul, as he said, because he'd come from Karnataka, and he said, I see the campus, I know what's wrong. He said, we have to reverse, I think maybe decades of harm to put back what was earlier centuries of growth. And identifying invasive species like acacia and lantana, figuring out what kind of plants and species would thrive and survive there, getting them in, supporting them for the first 5-10 years. It wasn't easy. I think I remember Ajit telling me when I first came was that we stopped allowing the farmers to send their cows to graze because there really was no grass. And at some point, I think in the last 10 years or so, there's now enough grass that they're just allowed to cut and take as much as they want. So bringing that ecological change was just something that I think is a case study unto itself. It was a bit like Agastya saying, we're selling creativity all across the country. Should we not be accepting that we need to use it and look inwards as well? It's like they say barbers have very bad haircuts. And so Agastya didn't want to be that person. It wanted to say that, okay, I've got all these ideas and all these innovations and all these methods of teaching creativity to children. We're going to start looking inwards and doing it. So the campus came along, the ecological stuff came along, the buildings started coming shortly after that once the funding started coming. And the buildings are their own story as well, right? So Shahrukh Mistry, who's not with us anymore, was phenomenal in the way that he almost pulled these buildings out of the living soil. He just said it's going to look as if the earth itself has pushed up these buildings because we're going to use the materials available here. We're going to make it one with the surrounding. And every building is going to have its own story. And when I interviewed the architectural firm that does the Mysteries firm, it was really nice. They said we fight. We actually have arguments in-house when a new building is coming up for Agastya. And all of us want to be the lead architect on that. And it genuinely becomes a matter of pride that which one of us actually gets to do it. And whether you look at the Innovation Hub, which is my favorite building, which is shaped like a chameleon, and where you can go and lie down at night and see the stars, or the auditorium, which is a dung beetle shape, or even the planetarium, which is, of course, just a dome. Each of them has a story to tell. Each of them is constructed in a completely novel way. No air conditioning in the middle of Andhra Pradesh, and yet you feel perfectly cool in the auditorium. So that kind of thinking and that kind of the way that they kind of built the campus, I think any child getting in is immediately astoundingly confronted with the idea that yes, something different is happening here, and I'm going to learn something different by being a part of this.
What about the thinking behind building this campus? Mahavir had sent like a brief to architects in the world to respond. It's not just Indian architects. And the brief that he had gave you, described in the book, what had he told?
He doesn't know. He doesn't have it anymore. He said I can't really find the brief, but he said he described the land. He described it as undulating. I think he'd given two criteria, maybe. One was that they.
It was just a 2-page brief, and I gave a very brief description of the land. But along with that, I gave the contour map. So that itself gave a very good view of the type of land, the undulating nature of the land. So I think what I recollect is I just told them that we have got to build up a campus, and we have a railway line passing nearby the campus, and you can see the trains passing by also. So the campus should be built in such a way that you don't block the
view.
surrounding.
That was really wonderful.
And also, whatever buildings you do, there should be a common thread
Yes, that's right.
across, so that though it is different, there should be some connection between building to building, and it should be widely spaced for people to move and be with nature during the day.
Yeah, that was really wonderful.
It was.
Brief for the people and now the way the campus is. In fact, when we enter, you usually describe in the book, when we enter the Agastya campus, I think many of you have seen Jurassic Park. Right? Spielberg captured that moment. When you go there, Jurassic Park, even before watching the movie, I was imagining how he would show, and of course, he did better than my imagination. And I think Agastya, when you do the entrance, you should describe that. The Agastya Kuppam campus, when you go, that entrance itself captivates. What you see before you even reach the Agastya statue.
Well, for one, you come off a very dusty road, which is being done up, and so I guess there's a lot of work going on. So it's a typical Andhra heat. It is, of course, there's greenery around, but the roads are very winding, so you end up wondering where you are, and then suddenly you see the board, and then you drive up, and then there's greenery just starts building up as you go closer. And yeah, the first thing you see, of course, is the cricketer. So you see a guy in mid pose, a batsman, and as you drive past, you suddenly realize, oh, it's layers. It's basically different things. And then as you get up to the campus, there's Agastya's statue is right there in the middle. And then it depends where you go, right? So that's usually the point where you stop. And if you want to go to Parijata, which is where the original dining hall and the rooms are, that's one thing. But if you take a left off, then suddenly you start seeing one by one all these buildings just come to life around you. And it's still very sunny, and it's still warm, because of course you can't do much about the Andhra heat. But every year you'll start finding there's a little more shade, there's a little more, the trees are being spoken for a little more aggressively, and they're starting to kind of come over the roads, make a little more shadows spreading around. And yeah, it's just going to be I can't wait to see over the next 10, maybe 15 years, how much more that's going to explode.
As Mahaga described this undulating,
Yeah.
what you call forsaken land.
Yes.
There was nothing, but grass was not growing there. And there is this thing about how was it flattened by, again, Balram, with the earth mover,
Yeah.
EMS. No? I think that's worth listening to again.
So I think Mahavir and Balram took, I think they got Bemel rented them a bulldozer, and they had a tractor, and they were told you can keep it for 30 days, but you have to give it back, and the fuel is on you. And it is actually extremely undulating. Even now, if you try and go for a run on campus, for example, you'll find you are either huffing and puffing up a slope or just trying to keep yourself from falling down while you run down a slope. So it still has that. But at least the bulk of it, they felt, okay, if we can at least flatten a decent portion, then that can be kept for the initial buildings. And it was, I suppose they etched out the road that goes around campus, which is currently the main arterial road that we have. And a few key areas were bulldozed and made flat. And Balram had to, I think in the mornings he would come, he would work the bulldozer. In the evening he would get on the tractor, he would drive to Kuppam town, collect fuel for the next day and come back. And that was it. That was their 30-day journey. And they had to do it because there was a deadline, and there was nothing else to do because there was no money for renting a bulldozer after that at the beginning. And again, it's typical Agastya, right? It's like, why would someone do that? Why would Mahavir spend his time bulldozing, chewing into the land like that? But it amazes me even now. Yeah.
Balram is there. I think there are many others. This is actually literally, keeping a undulating land flat to build some things and still see the horizon
Yeah.
is built. But also many other people who moved mountains here. And also people who supported Agastya mission by giving philanthropic things. There is, I think I have a few names that you don't know. Alok Oberoi, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, Deshpande Foundation, Infosys, Ramdev, and also Tiagu's family and many others.
Yeah.
And some of this, how did it come about? It was not an easy task. It's one thing to have a dream, other thing to realize that dream. And money is always needed.
Yeah. So Ramji says that there was a lot of resistance initially. And when we speak to donors, a lot of them say that especially around 99-2000, there were more pressing things to give money for. And education, while Agastya's founders saw it as a gap that needed to be filled, it was not, as you might say, a here and now emergency. So you have poverty, you have nutrition, you have health, and education unfortunately came slight of second to those. It's easy to see that if you have a child who hasn't had lunch, it's very tough to then try and teach them science. So a lot of the donors were coming forth saying, no, we'd rather focus on that. What the Agastya team was saying was, this is not something that may be a here and now emergency. But 25 years from now, you'll start seeing, if you don't have this intervention today, it's like any kind of R&D. It may not yield revenues today, but it's going to be the reason you have anything to fall back on tomorrow. And a lot of people didn't understand that philosophy. So I think Alok was maybe one of the first large donors that stepped in. And his story is, of course, quite fun that he and Ramji met. It helped that Ramji was this financier who had quit everything. So a lot of the financiers he met were just curious to know why someone would do something so bizarre, and granted him an audience just because they wanted to maybe pick his brain or find out what on earth possessed him to take this, make this change. And Alok was one of those. He just heard of him through a friend and said, yeah, at the very least I can meet him. And we've written about his interaction where he was late for the meeting, ordered sandwiches, ham sandwiches, and then proceeded to wolf them down while Ramji just sat quietly and spoke. And at some point he said, why aren't you eating? And Ramji's like, well, I'm a vegetarian. And this guy was completely obviously floored by the calmness with which that was delivered. And he felt horrible. He said, look, I'm standing there eating. I made this guy wait. And now this. And he said, look, what can I do for you? And that was the first decent, I think, chunk of money that had come through. And then, of course, Alok joined the board and has been a wonderful, I would say, a guide and a mentor on the board as well to spearhead the foundation and steer it in the right directions. But I think the next few years was still extremely difficult because the kind of vision that Agastya had was not being realized with the kind of money that was coming in. And it wasn't till the Jhunjhunwala meeting that Agastya really went from, you could say, 0 to 1, as you say in any business. Because up until that point, a lot of the money was allotted region-wise. So a company was giving, say, 2 mobile vans, but they were saying we want it in this particular area. And so if we had 2 vans running in that area, then it didn't make sense to have another 2. So if someone else came, I'll give you money. We were like, yeah, but we needed to go to that very underserved area. And they'd say, well, no, that's not why we're giving it to you. So Jhunjhunwala's money was it was fungible. It was basically, we could do whatever we wanted, whether it was developing the campus, adding, fixing key gaps. If any program or foundation if the donors pulled money back, immediately there was something to at least keep it alive and keep it running. So that was very useful, and I think it allowed the foundation to build to a level where then people started seeing all the work that was happening, and it built on from there.
Yeah, actually, in terms of fundraising, in any book discussion or a movie review, we are not supposed to reveal certain things because any startup who wants to raise money, like Agastya did, could not have done without the money. How it did, I would not think that it's the right thing to do. There are spoilers. We will not reveal them in this discussion. But it's really wonderful. I mean, people should read the book and find out how actually money was raised for Agastya. Also, something that it's not in the book, but I can go a little bit out of it. That I talked to many of the Agastya people, and I think it was either Tiago or Garu or Kumar told me about this thing about aspirational poverty. See, it's Agastya's mission is to serve the economically disadvantaged children in rural areas. But then there is also the other kind of poverty that they don't know what they want to become. So I think that's something that I think with the children, I think I want to hear about this aspirational poverty and how Agastya addressed it.
Firstly, this is an out of syllabus question. I hope we can accept that. But I think what we spoke about earlier, which is what do you see education as, right? And we always saw education as a knowledge delivery mechanism. And it was true for a long time. If I wanted to know when World War II ended, for example, or who the Prime Minister was, you'd need your teacher to tell you because it wasn't readily available. We've reached a point where information is largely democratized. Facts are no longer a premium. So I can find out, when was Amitabh Bachchan born would be a debate in school, right? You'd have to ask, and someone would say, my father once said this, and someone would say, and then you'd arrive at a consensus-based date or rough date for when he was born. It's no longer the case. So Agastya was seeing this shift that kids are going to school not to learn knowledge anymore, but to actually understand how to evolve their own thinking, to go from point A to point B. So you would rather a child takes that journey and arrives maybe at the wrong answer than is spoon-fed the right answer in the beginning and goes around saying, I know A, B, C, D, E. So it's a much more difficult path for them to take. But once they take it, they suddenly realize things are not as simple as they seem. I'm not wedded to my circumstance. I can possibly outthink my way of a difficult situation. And this starts to change their own mindset. So when we say caring and confidence, a lot of the YLs that we've seen are living very different lives to what their parents were living. And it's because they've suddenly been confronted with this idea that I'm not limited by this, by the constraints that society has put on me. If I can think my way through, there's probably a design thinking way for me to get out of this. So we talk of, I think she was on the video. Was that the same Shravani who was, who about the cows and Yep. So yes, I saw her name and I got very happy because I've been talking about her all over the place. And hers is a classic design thinking example, right? So you have this girl whose parents have no money. They have one cow. They're planning to sell the cow to raise money. And it's a classic poverty trap. As we learn about in economics, you sell the one asset that you have and 3 months down the line or 6 months down the line, you're back where you started without the asset. And this girl who had gone through the Young Instructor Leader program begged her parents not to sell the cow, somehow convinced her parents, okay, just take on an extra shift. We'll just hold on for the next few months and try and hold on to this asset that we have. And the cow gave birth to calves. Eventually, milk started being yielded. The money for that milk went into supplementing the family's income. Things improved, and suddenly one fine day she's going to college. And of course, she came to Agastya and she gave a wonderful speech where she says, poverty is a state of mind. Now, poverty is also can be very crippling, and it's a place of privilege to say you can, wiggle your way out of it. But there are kids within the Agastya ecosystem who will testify or, give examples that it wasn't an absolutely impossible situation. But yes, had I not been taught how to think, then I would have probably just accepted that, yes, we have to sell the cow and that's the best solution possible. So for me, that's the biggest impact that Agastya has had, because science learning is how we started. STEM was how, things started. But taking that child from there to a method of thinking through things, as Dr. Kiran Kumar said, it's not just about what is, it's about how you can actually turn the situation to something that you can actually benefit from. And I think that typifies what Agastya has been doing for the last, I think, at least 10 years. That's been the focus.
The stories of Shravani and Vasanta
Yep.
and Himanshu, these are the kids.
Mm-hmm.
What they learned at Agastya and how they transform their lives and lives around them is really remarkable. And you talked about how Agastya is doing the STEM, and how there is actually STEAM, there is arts connection. And you talk about, you use very nice phrases in the book. You said dancing in the white spaces. I really like that. So there is a business world to raise money. Of course, from educationists, there are universities and others, but also there is society, and there is arts and science and everything put together. There's white spaces, and you also use this very telling analogy. If you have a very compacted soil, it's very difficult to seep through it, whereas well-furrowed land, you can do it. So that kind of analogy, I want you to elaborate to see how Agastya was able to seep through education system that was such a compacted land, very difficult to enter it in the white spaces.
So I've been using this analogy. It's not in the book, but of cricket, right? And what India used to have in terms of how it would analyze its batsmen. So someone once said, you have to go to Ranji and watch the players play there, and their average is the number that you rate them on, right? And so there was no bandwidth to assess players holistically, so that's the only number you went with. And eventually you would have players realizing that if they didn't protect their average, they wouldn't get called up to the national team. Then you'd have players come up to the national level and still protect their average. And you'd see a lot of Indian matches where the match is lost, but the guy looks kind of happy because he's made a 50. And you would get very frustrated, like, where are the match winners? And it wasn't until money started coming in, until we started thinking about the sport differently. Money did help, infrastructure helped, bandwidth increased. And suddenly you started saying, okay, can I evaluate a player based on other metrics? Is he a match winner? Does he play well under crisis? Is he the guy that will take the catch to win the T20 World Cup? I mean, we can't assess those things purely from the average. And then you started seeing those kinds of players coming up the ranks and possibly playing. So Dhoni, for example, may not have made it to the national team 20 years ago, or whenever he was, before this. But eventually you realized, okay, this guy's absolutely cool under pressure. This is a quality I can't assess from the average. So I see the average as looking at marks. It's akin to the same thing. When you evaluate a student purely on that number, you're missing out a lot of other stuff that is potentially hidden in that child. And so you don't ask, does this child have leadership qualities? You don't ask, is he musically gifted, or does he have crazy kinesthetics or spatial intelligence, which I know I don't have, wherein those are the ones who go on to build these lovely buildings that you architects typically have spatial intelligence. And we were always assessed in school on logic and linguistics. This was the limit to a brainy kid. You're either good in science, you're good in maths, or okay, if you're good in languages, then you're smart. If not, then everything else is something you'll have to discover for yourself later on. Agastya started stepping back and saying, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to find leaders amongst these children. We've met kids on campus who want to get into politics. I don't know what that kid's marks are, but when he stood up to speak, the whole room was just, you could feel the energy. It was like Dhoni walking onto a stadium. You just feel a magnetism around this guy. And you think, well, there's no way I could have assessed this child if I was looking at his mark sheet. And Agastya, by doing this, and as I said, dancing in the white spaces, bringing in arts, bringing in theatre, bringing artists to campus, and then having kids come and learn from them, just giving kids this avenue along which to say, maybe I'm not a 99-100% student. I'm a decent enough student, but maybe that's not where my key strengths lie. I'm crazy to go and compete with someone who's absolutely at that end of the spectrum, when I, in fact, probably am more geared to a job wherein I need to deal with people, where I have great networking opportunities, or where I have to speak a lot and basically make connections and inspire people. So that, I think, has become, in a way, what Agastya is pushing a lot of these kids to discover about themselves. And we're seeing it now with 25 years gone. We're starting to see the impacts of that, because we had to wait this long to see. If you intervene and a child is maybe 10 or 11, it needs about that much time to start seeing, okay, what did this child do with their understanding of what they learned through Agastya? And we're seeing it now, I think.
Yeah, actually, what the children learned and what they're doing is beautifully captured in Agastya's books, The Fireflies and 100 Young Achievers. They're all remarkable. I mean, they may not have, all of them probably didn't go to study science, but they all did something with the scientific camper. So the assessment, the impact of Agastya, you come from Rishi Valley, and J.T. Krishnamurthy, like most philosophers, they always think that education is a churning topic for them, and he actually thought a lot about education. And some of the things that you just mentioned about Agastya, no fear, no condition.
Yeah.
Teacher is just a facilitator and not teaching you to do this rote learning. Since you have gone through Rishi Valley system yourself, and so did Ramji, and Raghavan was very close to J.T. Krishnamurthy, do you think J.T. Krishnamurthy would have appreciated what Agastya has done?
We have some Rishi Valleyites here, I think. I don't know, you should ask
You
them.
can raise hands if you have Rishi Valley. So you have to raise your hand.
I can see them. I don't know why they're not raising their hands. This is typical Rishi Valley, by the way. They will not, they won't engage. I write in the book that fear and education have to be decoupled. I think it's very clear about that. And telling a child you have to get 99 or 100 is putting a gun to their heads and saying, how can you have joy for what you're learning if that's your criteria? You cannot possibly derive. We all went through, why do I have to learn this? I don't want to. And now if I read a book on history, I'm so enthralled because no one's testing me on it. No one's, again, telling me you've got to remember each and every line otherwise. I think he'd be very happy that we've managed to decouple it. There's a thing we write in the book where Ramji asks these students, would you still want the instructor to come to your school? If I gave all the experiments and I kept them in one of your classrooms, would you still want him? And they said, yes, we would. And then he says, well, no, I'll train your teachers. I'll give them the experiments. And they said, no, we still want him to come. And he's like, okay, fine, I will do everything. I'll set up a science center in your school. You guys don't have to come to campus. You don't have to meet anyone from Agastya. You still want him to come? Yes, sir, we want him. Why do you want him to come? Because he's the only one who treats us like a friend, right? And I think we have done remarkably well. And Revati is here somewhere, I think, yes. And kudos to her, because I think a lot of her efforts have gone into ensuring that there is a uniformity in the way that Agastya trains its instructors. There's uniformity in the way we conduct the classes. And there is there's a style to which they do it, which makes the child feel extremely happy to contradict the teacher, to argue, to ask why, which is the crux of what we're doing here. And eventually just to have a good time with them, rather than to feel I need to be at my best behavior, and if I don't answer the question exactly as it's being asked, I'm going to be in some sort of trouble. And again, bringing the girl to the front of the classroom, I think that's been a phenomenal achievement of Agastya. When I spoke to Revati, I think one of the early things she said was, I don't know if I write about it in the book, but that we had this issue where instructors would come back saying, look, I'm very happy, like the boys I can deal with, right? I can ruffle his hair or pat him on the back and get him a little more engaged. But I'm scared to, obviously, I don't want to. And the answer was, no, don't do it to anyone. Just, just stop all that stuff and you'll immediately find the girls get more comfortable and they start. And we see so many girls, who come through the Agastya system who just completely outshining all the other kids, and they have something to prove. And when you give them that voice that you do not need to be afraid to speak in class, then you just start seeing a whole other gear level of performance.
It's really interesting. Actually, that's what we see when you go to Agastya or any of the events of Agastya. There are definitely disproportionate large number of girls, maybe more than 50%. It's really remarkable. And now I want to ask a personal question. You are a writer. You are a professional writer. You wrote a couple of books. I have not read them yet. I will read them. They are crime fiction. There is a murder. There is a villain and all this. But you wrote a book about Agastya. Is there a villain in this book?
I don't know. Is there
Well, I don't like books with villains. So
you read it. If you found someone that I've portrayed that way, I should be very worried.
I found.
Who did you find? Tell me.
I want to hear from you.
I don't think one of the nicest things about writing about Agastya is you're not ashamed of any aspect of what they've done. I think it's very rare in this day and age where you have a hero, you look up to them, and later on you find, oh, this happened and that happened. And it's a lot easier to just have a fictitious figure to kind of look up to. I think again, even sitting inside the boardroom and interacting with staff and, having access to all the, as we call them, the big five at Agastya, it just makes you very aware of how human and how absolutely dedicated the entire organization is into doing what they're doing. So I don't think there's a villain as such. I'd be very interested to know who you thought was.
I will read a sentence
okay.
where that made me think that, oh, he's the villain. But I'll give some context.
I'm going to get a sticker.
No. Exactly. I'll tell you the context where I thought of a villain in this whole Agastya story. I read a lot of biographies of scientists, researchers from Galileo onwards. People are living now also. Especially in the English system, there is always this astronomer royal, who is the one who controls the purse strings for funding. And there is this famous book about longitude, the John Harrison, and one of the astronomer royal is a villain there because they will prevent what somebody wants to do passionately. And you have a sentence, it's a really nice sentence, I'll read it out. In a battle of consequence, the nobility of a cause rarely supersedes the preservation of prosperity. You write it in the context of .com bubble burst, which you had mentioned a while ago. A lot of money was promised. The moment .com bubble burst, and people who had promised suddenly withdrew, and all plans were made Agastya. I thought that was somewhere. So people don't give out money so easily, although many people have given. But it's always, when you want to do something passionately, people who give money are always like astronomer royal is a villain.
No, that is true. I'm glad I didn't mention names, but also I do mention there's a line someone read it to me the other day during an interview, and it sounded very harsh, which was that the Lancastrian system had been put in place by British overlords and then of course I've used the word British overlords. Doesn't make them look in a great light, but I think we're okay with that.
Anyway, I was just looking because you write fan fiction, so I thought you would somehow get it. But actually, this other thing about IISc connection, you mentioned that right from the beginning, IISc faculty was there to train teachers, and they also did ecological studies. They wrote reports, and as recently as last month, we had this science enrichment program in IISc, and Kumar and Tiago and others ran it. We have IISc connections. Also, Agastya gave a bust of Ramanujan. It's there in our faculty hall. They also given it to Cambridge University, Stanford, MIT, IIT Madras. So what does this symbolize? The bust of Ramanujan, Agastya donating to? Because Agastya is an organization that needs to grow and it's giving back to the academic institutions the bust of Ramanujan. I was wondering, what does it symbolize?
See, for IISc, just to bring back that, I think as you said, it's been a beacon, I would say, of of support and inspiration, I think, for Agastya. A lot of the early successes wouldn't have happened if we didn't have scientists step outside, make it worth their while to validate or vouch for Agastya's methods long before those methods, I think, had achieved any kind of field test or had actually been put into place. And so that was a huge thing. And as we write, the IISc event that Ramji spoke at was seminal in creating that buzz that we had initially from the scientific community. Of late, the Ramanujan thing, it started with Ramji visiting, of course, he visited in 1987, Ramanujan's wife. I think he was in that area and he was reading about him. And he just asked around that, where did he live? And someone said, no, he lived close by. In fact, his wife is still alive. I think she was in her 90s at that time. And it was very sad. She was very old, and all she said was, no one really remembers my husband. And I think that struck the entire team as kind of unfair, because here we have, like, the mathematical community sees him as this, god that once was. And the entire academic world really knows him. And for a long time, we in school would hear about him and read about him, but it wasn't really, you could say, an advertised figure in that sense. So I think someone made a bust and it came out extremely well, and we just felt this would be amazing if we can put it in key institutions around the world. And as you said, I was in Massachusetts. I went to MIT. I saw the one at MIT. It was very nice to see Agastya's name there, and that it was heartwarming, honestly, to stand there and be next to it. But I think it's just a little bit of, yes, giving back. It's a nice way to sort of doff your hat to someone that we think played a huge role in mathematics. And when we developed the Math Spark, we had this idea that we want to spread the idea of mathematics a lot more. And I think it's just that, in action.
Yeah, that math park by Sujata Ramdora Shastri had done is really amazing to see all the things. Actually, I feel that when you go to Agastya Kuppam campus, it's not the children that get excited. We get excited. We don't want to return.
I hope they get excited. But yeah.
Children to get excited.
But we do. I mean, a lot of adults who come there feel they've missed an opportunity not being there when they were children. Yeah.
Also, talking about Ramanujan, I also was wondering, now Agastya has reached out to millions of children in India, throughout India, because of science centers, Agastya centers, and so forth. What do you think is the next aspiration of Agastya? And I was wondering, this Ramanujan, like Agastya, wants to find or arouse curiosity in economically disadvantaged rural children. And Ramanujan actually symbolizes that in many ways. Raman was born to a privileged family, but not Ramanujan. And he just living by himself. So is there a aspiration for Agastya to find more Ramanujans?
We did have a plan recently. In fact, when Navam was set up, I think the idea was to find these diamonds in the rough. And I guess the question always was, do we raise the level of the ocean by 1 millimeter, or do we fill a glass of holy water? That's always been the idea. And interestingly, someone just 2 days ago gave me this Agastya myth. He said, we pray to Agastya when there's lightning, apparently. And I wasn't aware of this. And he said the story goes that Agastya was meditating and there was a lot of thunder and lightning. And he got really upset. And he took the entire ocean in this part of his hand. And he lifted it up. And he said, I'm going to drink it unless you guys, simmer down. And so everybody came. So when there's a lot of lightning, So I was like, imagine that. We're raising the level of the ocean by 1 millimeter. And there's actually a story of Agastya doing, more than 1 millimeter, but raising the ocean itself. So that's always been the main philosophy. Even now, if you look at Agastya 2.0, we're trying to reach 100 million children by the mid-2030s. Now, yes, out of those, if a Ramanujan or a Raman or an Einstein comes out, we'd be more than happy and we'd support them and we'd say, absolutely go on and shine. But I think the idea is more about creating a generation of children that understand the value of learning by inquiry and learning through applying creativity and curiosity to what they're doing. It means a lot more to us that we've done that for a whole generation than if we were able to just pull out 2 or 3 kids and really put them on a global stage. Not that that shouldn't or wouldn't happen if it presented itself, but it's not part of the mandate, I think, as such.
This reaching out to so many millions of kids is not an easy task. That's why you have called it moving the mountains, moving mountains. And by the way, this I was curious because that's what Agastya's thing is. To raise the ocean level by 1 millimeter, it actually takes 360 trillion gallons of water.
It's not easy.
So it's a lot of things. I would have put actually atometer, not a millimeter. 10 power minus 18.
If a large enough mountain gets put into the
No,
water.
your comparison is to fill the glass to the brim versus this.
True.
That comes out to be 10 power minus 18 meters.
Come to IISc for this kind of correction.
Well, curiosity. So, actually, apparently, because of the climate change, every year the oceans level are raising by a few millimeters
Oh, wow.
per year. That's amazing. That my curiosity exercise when I read that.
We are part of that.
But it's amazing. But actually, I think this will be my last question. And then audience will have some questions as well. As I read the book, of course, there's a lot of, I guess, there's amazing incidents, and it's always like there's a problem, there's a solution. That pattern is there throughout the book, and the people of Agastya, how they have contributed. I met several of them, but now when I meet them, I know exactly what they've done because of the book that you described. And also, book has several dramatic incidents. We heard one of the kids saying that he gets goosebumps.
Mhm.
I must admit that I got goosebumps a dozen times or more by reading this book. There was this incident of Naxalites actually, intercepting a mobile van, and I want to hear.
I wasn't aware of this till right at the end. It was just, I think I was speaking to Manju or Balan, I'm not sure. Yes, yeah. And then he mentioned this, and I said, oh, this has to go to the book. And it was interesting because middle of the night, they suddenly stopped. And I guess it just gave them this feeling that, and I've been telling a lot of people at interviews this, it's a bunch of good guys doing really good work. And it's difficult for anybody to look at what Agastya is doing and say, okay, fine, I should be coming in the way of this. And the fact that, Naxalites actually stopped the van and looked inside, saw the experiments, asked them what they were doing, and said, okay, by all means, go on your way. It is a testimony to how pure and how absolutely fundamental it is what they're doing. And so that's why I included this story. I thought it was quite interesting and gives you an idea.
And also the way you describe the incidents, I'm just telling for people to, when they read the book, they'll see, you read the preface or the first chapter, I'm actually imagining a motion picture, movie. Because you say they're starting on the top of hill, scorching heat of Andhra Pradesh, as you said earlier, Ramji and Elabareddy and another Ayurveda doctor. And you described that dramatically. I thought this must be the starting scene, the beginning scene of the movie. Do you think it can be made into a movie? Or at least I was reading the book and I told Ramji also that there are so many incidents, so motivational, so inspirational, that you can make at least the kids could enact skits based on the way you capture the thing. So I would like to hear from you. Do you visualize a movie based on this book?
Could work. When Ramji is a huge Godfather fan, so one day I called him and I said, I'm writing The Godfather, but you're Don Corleone and Mahavir is your consigliere. And so he was very excited. He said, yes, that's a good story. But as you said, even the opening, the Mulikavanu, how they thought about it was absolute, creativity in the face of desperation. And it makes for a great story. And I suppose it would be nice to have kids enact it on campus and understand the kind of, again, I just wrote the book. There's heroes, it's a hero's journey throughout of folks that have honestly just done remarkable stuff. And whether you're speaking about the founders, you're speaking about Tyagu, Sai, Hari, who are both here, all the guys who have stepped out of campus and to build programs across the country, each of which have their own stories, each of which have their own, when you talk about the North Project, I think Mukesh was saying he was not getting permission, how he went about it, it's absolute dogged determination, I think. So it's like heroes' journeys throughout the book in sort of little micro ways to make this entire thing possible. So I would love it if the kids could have an appreciation or understanding of how much has gone into to making this happen. And I think it would give them a great appreciation for the folks of Agastya, although I think they do have an appreciation for what Agastya is, I think,
Thank you. Maybe now we can have the audience, if they have any questions.
Not a question. My name is Mamta Sharma. I think it's about 20 years ago, Thiago, when I was head of IBM CSR, and when Thiago and Ramji met with us. Believe me, you talked about the funding. It was very difficult to really understand whether this would be, going forward and how long it would be. Sitting here, when you're talking about the journey, I can really see that an institution has been built. Our maybe contribution was very limited, but at that point of time, I do believe that was very crucial. You talked about exhibition. I think first time we did an exhibition outside in Palace grounds, I think. After the first day, we had to really cater for 50,000 children. It was amazing. We were not ready for them.
Yeah.
So to see, this is something that struck me is institution building. And now they've reached a stage where you can very clearly see the organization is going to go further and maybe for another 100 years or something.
Sure.
Right? That's very important in my view, because I've seen that early journey, important to understand and important to appreciate. It's just a comment sitting here,
No, thank you, and I'm sure your contribution at that time would have been instrumental in keeping things going, which is really how Agastya even got from stage to stage.
Now that you publicly shamed Rishi Valley kids and not willing to engage, I feel the pressure to ask you a question. I think one of the interesting things in the book is that you mentioned a couple of initiatives which didn't work or which had to be abandoned. And I thought it would have been interesting to expand a little bit more about that, possibly as a problem statement for somebody else to take up.
Mm-hmm.
If you can expand a little bit, if not you, then maybe Thiago, Mavi, what were the some of the programs you abandoned and why you abandoned it? Why did they work?
Thiago, do you want to? I can think of one, but I'm sure you can think of a few. No, I can only think of the Gifted Children program, which we write about as having this thing, but I think now it's been sort of revived. So,
the Gifted Children program is not exactly abandoned.
Huh.
It's not scaled as much as we would. Despite the enormous support that we have received from IISc, particularly Suresh here and Kaushal Verma and several others who have made it happen 2 years in a row, and we are looking forward to further doing that. But as you said, the portion millimeter versus filling the cup is always in our minds when we look at stakeholders' interest. There are programs that have not taken off. You mentioned LOB. LIB, which is the predecessor to that, was meant to be circulated among 10 schools, 10 boxes kind of a thing, never took off. Was a logistical nightmare. It didn't work at all. Another failure which led to the LOB was the trying to get the instructor to be a driver. Such small initiatives which never took off are also, but then you learn from failures, and in fact you would be interested to know that we are looking at within the campus sort of an interactive museum of failures, how to learn from failures. So we are looking at that because that helps children to sort of understand that not everything that you venture out into will succeed, but you learn and move on. So that is something that we are looking at as we speak.
that is such a typically Agastya way to turn something around and make it positive. I love that.
Pressure's on.
Two Rishi Valley questions. Wow. I don't know these two, by the way. I just.
So I was trying to understand the scale actually. I mean, Agastya has done amazing work, which I actually still need to see firsthand. But I've read about it and I really admire the work that's happened to all of you. I want to understand how much does it need to scale for saturation?
Saturation for
It's
And how many more Agastyas do you need? You gave your goal for the next 10 years.
the goal for the next 10 years is 100 million and probably reaching 20 million a year, which would still be only, I think, less than 10% of the government school going population. Now, it's a good question because when you talk about a classroom, how many kids, smart kids, do you need in a class to pull the entire class up? We typically found that if 2 out of 10 were very smart, then the rest of the class kind of was able to feed off them and kind of level up, as it were. So maybe that's still, we're only halfway there, even at 2030. But there's other programs around. We've always said that if Agastya's methods are replicated by anyone else, we have no problem sharing the philosophy or sharing our the way that we've done it. And there are, I suppose, people stepping up and saying, want to do something similar. But no, I don't think it's going to be it's not a 10-year thing. I think India has a lot more, much longer way to go, I think. But we're addressing the problem bit by bit, and we'll continue. Yeah, fair enough.
One more, Agastya. Yes, yes.
So, well, saturation by Agastya is not going to happen. Methodology and processes and programs that we have created and the underlying philosophy can definitely be imparted. No bar on IP transfer, nothing. And bringing it into policy advocacy is something that can change. And I think the NEP 2020 addresses quite a few things that we have been practicing for a couple of decades. And in fact, late Dr. Kasturirangan once said that part of what we have done there came out of some of the experiences that you guys have gone through. National Knowledge Commission 2008, etc., and all that. So policy advocacy can change the way children learn everywhere. So we can create mini Agastyas in schools, and if you can get that done, activity-based learning, project-based learning, problem-based learning, solutions, and all of that, then I think the purposes, saturation or close to that can be achieved.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic. I was just thinking. I mean, it need not be a parallel system, right? It would be ideal if this just got incorporated into. And
I think the NEP does have hands-on now, and that's partially come through observing that it seems to be having.
So, to what extent do you all talk to the government system to say, can we help translate this to your systems?
I don't know, Thiago, what is the interaction level with the government in terms of creating that policy? I don't think there is. Is there a back and forth, or is it just that they observe and they say, okay, we're going to do this?
We have served on committees.
Yeah.
We've served on committees where we have gone about to talk about such things. We think that books like what you have now written and we are trying to proliferate, and the various soft things that we have done will make people sit up and take notice. We definitely talk to senior people, Ganu here and Kumar. They do that most of the time when they go into the JNB system or the CBSE system and all of that. But it is not such a concerted lobby effort. It's still here and there. But possibly what's picked up can be proliferated later on.
So I just want to go into a bit of a side alley here. See, all that has been said at the macro level is just great. We need more Agastyas, we need to get into the government system. But at the level of the implementation of the program, one is always conscious that success is not permanent. You think you've cracked one problem and you think, now I figured it out and it's going to work. And then you say, oh my God, it's not working there, it's not working here. So this constant effort to redo a solution or to find a new way of achieving the same thing. So at the level of the implementation of the program, I think that is a constant thing that one has to do. Not just finding new things, but even keeping the successes going. So that's very exciting actually. And that's something I constantly, I think, irritate Ramji with, saying, but did this happen? So anyways.
I'm so glad it's a statement and not a question. I was very nervous.
It's very my pleasure having listening this discussion. And I am very long back. I am thinking the same education system in coming in the India is very proud. And after having this discussion, I understand, as Kevin sir said initially, nowadays it is very compact, and there will be no time to think the innovative and creativity in the students in the classroom education. After just now I heard about this Agastya Foundation, and I am thinking it is a seeding of the ancient education system in India in a modern way. And the Abdul Kalam also, I have read very long back one article. Abdul Kalam was dreaming about the education system should be bring in India like this. There will be no curriculum, particular curriculum, and people allowed to think, and they will create their own way in the environment. And it is like experience learning, environment learning, and problem solving. So it's very happy, sir. I am also in the group of the discussion, and it is very pleasure and very happy.
Thank you.
This question is for Dr. Kiran Kumar.
Yes.
So you have compared Agastya to the Chandrayaan mission, the success of it, from the time that it was conceived to the obstacles you hit, and then finally getting to the point where there was a huge success. And the measure of the impact of that success was immense, right? From young children like your grandchild to people who were dancing in the streets at the success of moon landing. So one of the things that Ramji keeps talking about again and again is how you've been able to compare Agastya's journey to something like that. Could you illuminate?
Yeah. No, if you really look at when India started its space program, India, actually the very first time an object went into space is in 1957. India was a fledgling democracy just 10 years into independence, struggling to provide food, shelter and education to its citizens. At that time, looking at a technology of going to space for addressing problems of the country in itself a very probably not easily understandable or easily conceivable thing. So if you look at on the similar case, what Agastya started was trying to address what is this basic education all about, particularly in the places where people do not have access, in the remote places, etc. So if you look at that, then if you start going further, India started developing this space technology to provide communication, broadcasting, then weather monitoring, all that. But beyond that, as a country, if you have to grow, you need to make sure that you are becoming competent in a contemporary world, and your exploration of space requires a lot of competence to be built, and that can happen only when you go to plans like Chandrayaan, Mars mission, etc., where you are challenging the people to look beyond what you are doing and solving problems. So that means, in a way, trying to look well beyond your current competence. You are trying to increase the competence you have and be ready for failures. And if you look at in that context, many of the things that have been said in the August and even moving of the mountains, you see the desire was how to make it happen. And then in that process, you are extending well beyond what you are currently capable of doing. And this process is continuous. Just now, Madam said that though you might have solved one problem, it works for that particular case. When you try to scale up, you will find many different issues. So if you look at in that sense, extending beyond your current capability to address issues, and then be ready to face failures and keep correcting them. If you look at in that sense, what ISRO has done in this course, and even if you see Chandrayaan mission itself, the very first mission was just to go around the orbit of moon. But then it also discovered water. Then our next mission was have a controlled descent. When we found it inadequate, we built another mission which corrected based on that experience. And when the success happened is when you really see, even 2019, the entire country was actually looking at this. waiting for it to happen. But that was actually a disappointment. But in 23, when it happened, everybody really felt the joy of achieving something. So in the same way, if you look at what I'm seeing in the Agastya is, like I'm saying, every human being is a system. See, today we are not allowing enough opportunities for the system to be understood. You have such a powerful, intelligent system running it. We are not even allowing it to think about what are the capabilities that I have to deal with the world. So this experience of teaching whatever is coming is explaining to them there is all the things happening around you in nature. Learn from that, observe, make sense of it, and what you do not have today, build tomorrow. So in that case, whatever the advancement that has happened world over is never going to end. It's going to be a lot new things, and you are capable of doing that. Same way when we talked about Chandrayaan, man had landed on the moon, and lot of probes had gone, but still our mission showed that presence of water was discovered. So this is the example. There is never an end. There is always a new thing. Universe is so vast, and we are such a tiny thing, but we have the opportunity to explore. That is the linkage I am seeing.
Also, there is a nice phrase that Adhirath has used in the book for comparison of Agastya to Chandrayaan, which is untrammeled audacity.
Yeah.
That was the phrase he used. That was very nice. Thank you.
This has been an incredibly illuminating discussion, and we're very, very grateful to Professor Ananthasuresh specifically because he took the initiative to make this happen for the book. And also we are very, very grateful to Dr. Kiran Kumar, not just because he wrote such a wonderful foreword to the book that set the tone for the story that Adhirath was sharing, but also because he's been such a big supporter of the organization. And thank you all for being here, being a part of it. I hope it was interesting for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Being served outside, so please join us.
We have a small token of
Oh,
appreciation.
thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful.
Oh, sorry.